here, and then you can close it out in another minute. We can move forward. How's that?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bruce Oswald. Little background on this whole thing. First of all, I have no concept that I have a better idea of where technology or anything is going than you do. I don't feel I'm an expert on that, but somebody asked me to look at where technology and GIS were going in the coming year, and I started first of all, I kind of laughed at it, and then I started to think, well, this might be an interesting little project. So I spent a better part of December reading as much stuff as I could, and then I put together a little piece on, I took 11 different trends as I saw them, nothing earth-shattering that you wouldn't have already thought about. I put them down, and then I tried to put a little part of it in how I thought that might impact GIS. So it's a lot of stuff I read by other people much smarter than I did, and put together, and a little bit of my prejudices in the world will show up. I apologize. I did nothing on Bitcoin or mobile payments, but everything else is, it's stuff that was out there, and I think good pieces of information. This is kind of the idea behind this is that we want to get the discussion started, and we want to get people thinking about this if they're not already, and look at how they may have to change some of their tactics or strategies they're using in the coming years, and also what they might have to do to change maybe where they're going in their career. So with that said, let me move on.
All right, we're going to go ahead and close that poll. So basically from what we got here, Bruce, is that it looks like the mobile and cloud were the highest interest from people.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and close that survey.
We'll try.
And also, just so people know, after Bruce kind of goes through the impact of a trend, we'll have a short little poll that will pop up while he's just going through the impact for that trend, and then we can take probably maybe one or two questions depending on time. And if you want, just type those questions in the chat, and then Dale will relay those to Bruce.
Super. And we're not going to be able to pick out a lot, but Dale will do his best to pick out stuff that looks like it's going to be thought-provoking. And so, a lot of things going to happen. We're trying to get done by 1. I doubt that'll happen, but we'll do the best we can. There's no secret that mobile domination is out there, and it's taking over and it's moving forward. A number of things that came up. Gartner did a number of surveys and looked at stuff, predictions that phone used to access the web versus PCs was for the first time going to eclipse PCs. New York Times today showed that PC market contracted last year by 10%. And the other thing that Gartner also picked up was that mobile operating systems are going to be more plentiful than, say, Windows operating systems by 2015. So what you're seeing is that consumers, when they're using mobile devices to hit the internet, and we have to think of it in that way if we want to communicate with them, whether it be for GIS or anything. So having said those points, let me move on. It's just here's what we're thinking in terms of impact. I think it's going to be huge, both in 2014 and on, for geospatially powered applications. I think GIS professionals really need to think mobile first when they're designing applications or doing things, and need to understand that, like all the other apps out there, people are consumers now, not GIS professionals. Consumers are more and more used to simple, focused apps that are easy to use. And if you don't provide that, they're going to go elsewhere. And it's really as simple as that. I mean, great online GIS web applications are wonderful for a certain group of people, but by and large, the larger population is really, really focused in on easy-to-use apps. And so this is the poll. We'd like people to go in and read it and quickly take it now.
And then while you're doing that, if you also have any sort of thoughts about mobile technology, what it means to the GIS professional, what it of GIS services, please enter those in the chat box.
And right now it looks like, from what I gathered, the one question, what are your plans for deploying mobile GIS applications? The top answer was currently deploying mobile GIS applications, and the other one was not deploying at present, but see a need for this in future years beyond 2014. My plans for mobile GIS applications are primarily focused on, and a majority, 50%, are saying all of the above. So smartphones, tablets, laptop, and netbook computers. We'll go ahead and end the voting there now.
Bruce, we do have one comment that came in, basically just reaffirming the fact that these consumers are expecting apps to be pretty straightforward, simple, focused, easy to use, the type of thing you would expect probably to use on a smartphone.
And one other thing is maybe about like mobile-friendly websites, websites that become mobile-friendly that potentially could maybe take less to maintain than over having separate mobile apps for every operating system. I don't know what your thoughts would be on that, Bruce.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good step forward. But I've more and more conversations, even in the last couple of weeks, on other areas. It's really going to be back to simple applications that are driving in certain solving a problem. People don't want to need, the average consumer doesn't want to have to do anything where they have to turn on additional layers or any typical GIS related work, but just simple stuff. So I think that's better. I ultimately think, though, it's really back to simple apps.
Yeah. And the point that Alan is making in a comment is that oftentimes these apps, the GIS functionality actually is hidden. People are trying to answer a question or solve a problem which has got some sort of geospatial component to it, but they don't even realize it. They're just asking a good question, and behind the scenes is where GIS is working.
Absolutely. I agree totally, and that'll come up later. Excellent point. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I assume this is probably low on everybody's priority list for talking about. I'll go quickly, but I think it's important. And I wrote this actually in the end of November. The target attack may have come out, but I really think that you're going to see some really big company hit in 2014, and that's going to be the impetus for really changing how cybersecurity is used by these companies. I think, since Christmas, you've seen Neiman Marcus. Last week, Michael's, the craft store, was hit. But there's going to be something big. It just feels like that, and that'll have an impact. I think what that's going to mean is, especially when GIS is put in the enterprise, they're going to really need to improve its security features. And one of the bad, more philosophical things that I think come out of this is, the GIS community is all about sharing, and they're great at that. But I think it's going to change. I think it's going to change to more safety first, sharing second, and really refocus that end of the spectrum.
And
I just want to
Bruce,
put up the.
Bruce also had a question on that. Would be, do you believe, like with the larger companies out there like Google or Amazon that are potentially providing cloud services, do you feel like they're probably going to be on top of things as far as encrypting more data and could be potentially a better avenue for people down the road for security because they have the manpower basically and the know-how to try to protect their data that's being stored on their sites?
Yeah, I think. I mean, sure. I say this, they'll probably get hit, but I mean, nobody's immune to being hit. But I think that their capabilities have got to be so much better than whatever the average, I'll say, local government or medium-sized business can do on their own. I think that's really one of the major benefits of stuff in the cloud.
That's sort of a two-edged sword, though, because while the big boys may know how best to protect the data, it also makes them a prime target because of their size.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of value there for someone to hack.
And for the poll here, it says basically it looks like the leading answer for question number one was basically security concerns already directly influence how and to whom I distribute GIS data and applications. And then the other one was looking to the future, will security concerns limit the continued growth of geospatial technology or location technology? And that's actually pretty even across all three. 24% saying definitely, 34% saying somewhat, and 20% saying probably not. And we'll go ahead and end voting on that.
So we don't, nobody has submitted any chat questions on that, Bruce, so if you want to move on, we can.
I will. Okay, so the next one, we've kind of combined cloud and software as a service together. We've got a couple of slides on the trend here. You know, this is pretty plain stuff to say that cloud services are going to continue to grow. The use of larger scale storage facilities are just the metrics are such that you can save. They can do it a lot cheaper than individuals can. The competition is going to grow. It's going to continue to move. The prices for data storage are going to remain relatively low, or it may even be reduced. And you're going to see. I mean, data warehouse ownership is going to continue for certain things, but boy, you're going to have to look at it really, really hard and see why you're going to need to do that. And I think longer term, it's going to result in a reduction of IT costs as an overall percentage of the costs, operating costs for corporations. They got less hardware, less software, and less staff they have to deal with. Now, this slide more deals with software as a service. You know, this past year we've seen, you know, obviously Microsoft and Esri have really pushed out software as a service. They've done it for a number of reasons, but you know, obviously it's convenient to provide software to their customers. In some cases, they've used it as a tool to make the software easier to use, and I think ultimately that'll increase the market in those areas. It's easier to keep track overall of who's using what and provide updates and maintenance. I think that as we go through on this stuff, one of the things that you're going to see though is that the high costs of some of the services and you know, I can say that because I just went out and had to buy a new Microsoft Office a package the other day. You know, if you're going to buy it and you're going to get the Office, 365, it's about $100 a month. If you buy, I bought 2011 for like $120. It's we have not seen the increases in efficiencies be brought down to the consumer on these things yet. And I understand that it provides a higher level of profit margin and efficiencies for the companies, but you know, I think there's a potential for some pushback in certain areas where the costs have gone up, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
And Bruce, with the poll here going right now, it looks like for the first question, what are the major issues with storage of geospatial data in the cloud?
Yep.
We have please check all that apply. The leading answer is security, followed by cost. And then also for question 2, do you believe that SAS will become a viable option for the geospatial community? We have 25% saying yes and 25% saying yes, but only for the casual user, not for the advanced level work.
Okay.
Bruce, I just want to throw in one comment on this issue also is sort of to be the devil's advocate here, when you indicate that you may, this cloud storage may actually save costs in the long run. We may eventually get there when it matures enough, but I think at the present time, a lot of people are using it as an additional means for storage, an additional means for distribution, but not switching to it. In other words, we're still paying to stay locally, but we're also offering a cloud option.
Gotcha. And I think the scale of the use of it dictates, you know, when you're saving costs. I mean, obviously the larger corporations that are doing this save a lot of money, and you know, it'll change. The model will change as you get over time. But you know, currently you're not seeing the same kind of benefit in the smaller uses of it.
And Bruce, one thing too, like the service, software as a service, with that, I could see one of the problems being that if the internet goes down, you've lost your potential. So if you're trying to do a mapping program or something like that that's hosted as a service, as a software as a service type thing, that potentially you may not be able to access that application when you need it. And my question would be, you know, do you see a time down the road where there's actually a desktop and cloud application that work together as far as synchronizing information back and forth? So if something did happen, you lost that connectivity, you might have the desktop capability to continue doing your work.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I worked in was related to Homeland Security and emergency management, and yeah, you need belt and suspenders. And I think you need to evaluate. People tend to think that their application or whatever they're running is the most important thing in the world. And, you know, if you lose it for a couple hours or even a day, I guess, you know, you have to evaluate what the law is to your company or your government service or whatever you're doing. And that goes into the mix is whether you need to have both. There's a cost for both, and depending on the size of your organization, that cost could be substantial. But you know, if you need to do it, certainly in emergency operations, you need to do it.
And the other thing is, like, I know one of the questions was security related to the cloud platform. And that kind of goes back to the previous question with security. But once again, you know, like Google and Amazon, they have the most to lose if somebody were to breach their servers and start pulling out data. And so they probably have more of the capability to maybe potentially encrypt and protect information than maybe a smaller, say, instance, local government might be able to do, because they may not have the know-how or that type of thing to maintain the ever-changing markets out there and how people are hacking into systems.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, can I just move on to the second part of this, which is really, I just got one simple slide here on the impact as I see it to GIS. You know, cloud storage is going to lower the barriers for a lot of things. And once again, it depends on the scale you're talking at. And I think GIS users as software as a service users, not professionals, are gain the ability as the programs become easier and easier to use, more intuitive, I think that's going to grow the marketplace. I think the marketplace is, companies like Esri are going to continue to grow and do well, but I think also it's going to open up opportunities for a lot of mid-sized and smaller companies to provide newer, simpler, lower-cost services. Won't have the same capabilities, maybe as the more sophisticated GIS software companies, but there'll be a niche market in there, and that'll happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Open source.
Bruce, just a reminder to folks, when we do hit upon an issue that sort of strikes a chord with you, please enter something in the chat box so we can share some questions.
Okay. So open source. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time. I'd rather hear what other people have to say on this. A lot of things happened with the economic downturn in the last few years, and that's caused companies and governments to take a look at where they were spending money and what alternatives were cheaper. In most cases, if you're dealing with, the big nicks on open source was there wasn't support available like there are on the major software providers, if you look at an Oracle or something like that. But it's changing, and you've got service providers starting to realize that there's a marketplace out there, and they're starting to go after that. So I see the impact is it's just started, and it's not huge, but you've got suppliers or some providers that can support the software. There's ability for small-sized GIS consulting firms to provide lower-cost subscription fees as they build out things, and it'll be a segment of the market that's going to grow. It's not going to be, huge. I'm not saying anything is going to be dwarfed by this, but it's going to be there. It's going to be tenable, and it will work.
And Bruce,
yeah,
the poll's opening up now for people.
Okay.
And related to the open source, I know one question that I've heard before is basically, is an application that uses open source technology but charges a fee for open source. How's that one?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like quite open source.
But basically, I guess what would you see open source then basically being as a potential gateway also for new users in getting into GIS and into the GIS industry that maybe don't want to spend the money to start trying out different things related to GIS for whatever it might be, their work or.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is the top end of the market. I'm just saying people who are have a need to use this will have alternatives, and we'll look at those alternatives. And I'm certain to start out with, they'll look at it as a potential cost-saving way or way to get started and see, get their feet wet, see how well it works for them. And go ahead.
I was going to run through just the summary here for the survey. And while I'm doing that, if people want to post questions to the chat box, you can do that. But question one was, will open source geospatial software gain in market share in 2014 and beyond? Basically, there's two answers that are pretty close. Yes, definitely, probably, but it depends on factors such as the licensing and maintenance costs. And let's see, number two was impediments to growth of open source software. It looks like the two top answers were IT policies prohibit using it and uncertainty about upgrades and longevity.
There are always been the legitimate questions you got to pose on this sort of stuff. So, getting back to what we were just talking about, I think when people are entering and they don't know enough about GIS or whether it's going to help them in their efforts, I think that becomes a reasonable alternative for them to look at.
Yeah, I agree, Bruce. I think with the maturing of the open source movement, for small organizations, your nonprofits, your NGOs, things like that, it has become a viable option.
And Bruce, do you see like consultants also moving more towards the open source trend and focusing more on the services they provide and the costs associated with that than maybe necessarily about the resale potential of a software program?
Yeah, I think for the consultants, they can get more income or revenue by concentrating on what they have, which is, if you consider that somebody's going to buy, put their foot in the pail for GIS, and they're going to spend $100, and if the consultant can get the free software and provide a good portion of that money, use a good portion of that money for their revenue, it just opens up that marketplace for them, and that makes a difference.
All right. I'll go to the next one.
Yep. Okay, integration of GIS into IT. I mean, we started out with GIS as an environmental desktop solution. It's matured tremendously in the last few years, and software as a service is reality now. And I think that you're going to see, in fact, I know you're going to see CIOs pay much more attention to this, although they're consumed with a whole bunch of other things. This the need for location-based services is just going to be very hot in the commercial sector in the next year. They're going to need to drive people towards their businesses, and I'll talk more about this in the later slides, and make the in-store experience much more rewarding. So, yeah, that's really big, and it's happening, and you're going to see it. You've got your first New York State, you got your first Geographic Information Officer. It's just going to go. That's like just the tip of the iceberg here. So the impact. Okay. So as GIS moves into the IT arena, and I'm sure all of you guys or gals have seen this in your areas, but it's gonna be more directed by CIOs and IT policies. You're going to have to think of it more as yourselves as IT professionals. And there's going to be some additional structure and protocols that are going to be placed on you. I'm sure there are now, and it may be just the case that there's additional things that get thrown in on top of that.
And we've now opened up the poll here related to this topic. Bruce, one thing I did just want to ask you too is, basically with GIS and IT, do you see those kind of beginning to be blurred between the two different distinctions? And I guess eventually will we become GIT specialists, Geographic Information Technology specialists?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I really do. I believe that you've seen more and more programming be required of GIS professionals over the last few years, and yeah, that's probably exactly where it's going.
And right now with the survey poll here we got says are your GIS operations organizationally located within the IT department? We got 32% saying yes and 29% saying no. Does your IT department set standards and policies for acquisition of software, hardware, data storage, and distribution, security, etc., that have an impact on GIS operations? 35% are saying yes, 29% only in specific areas such as hardware acquisition. And the third question is your organization, company, agency, municipality, using location analysis or spatial analysis in routine business practices? And this is pretty even all the way across the board between yes, no, and in select areas such as infrastructure management. It's pretty even, 23%, 20%, and 23%. So, do you foresee integrating spatial analysis into enterprise management operations in the future? And 35% said yes, not at this time. It was 8%, so the rest are pretty low. 8% and 11% were the other ones, so basically yes.
Bruce, this is one issue that I have a concern about with the direction of education of geospatial professionals. As it becomes more and more evident that we focus on hiring programmers, are we trying to pull talent from, you know, the computer sciences departments rather than the geography departments? I think this integration of GIS into IT is inevitable and it's welcome in some fashion, but I wonder if it causes us to lose some focus on what the profession of GIS is.
Yeah, and also I noticed Al Leidner here just posted a thing on the chat too, just saying, you know, GIS still gets lost in IT, and many CIOs still don't get it. So basically, you know, I don't want to touch upon that, Bruce, but I agree with that assessment that sometimes the IT folks don't understand the full capacity of GIS or what even GIS is.
Yeah, and that's why I say it is some of these it'll be a trend that'll start just based on commercial enterprises looking for ways to deal with this location thing that they all of a sudden. Now I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes here.
All right.
Okay, let's move on to something that actually is near and dear to me, and I'm sure everybody else is going to go to sleep. But it's the integration of GIS into business workflows, and this was touched upon a little bit earlier. I really don't think the value of GIS technology is going to be fully realized till the consumer just uses it and doesn't have any care as to what it is. We saw it in the NY GeoCon presentation keynote last fall, where Jack Levy talked about how they'd integrated it in their workflows with the delivery operations. I think a lot of other companies are going to move in that direction, and they're looking for ways to differentiate themselves from their competition. And if they can start doing the math, as in what Jack showed us, that'll be the way they're going to improve their services. I think a big part of this, we'll talk about this in a minute, but location-based service, indoor mapping, ways to attract people to brick and mortar stores. It's all going to be big, and getting that in there without people understanding anything about GIS is going to be really important. And it goes back to that whole app thing we talked about earlier. So, I think really making a map or providing web services for the consumer, not the GIS professional, this isn't going to be enough. Professionals are going to need to understand and work closely with business analysts on how to do it themselves. And I'm not saying there's no rocket science there, but as organizations are looking to maximize the return on investment, it's going to be a big deal, and it's going to be bigger as we go along in the private sector. The public sector, they're already looking for opportunities to improve efficiencies and service, and I think this whole thing is going to gather momentum from the private sector on.
And also, Bruce, related to the previous question too, I saw that Sherry Norton there had put down, concrete implementation examples go a long way to winning over the CIO as a champion, or as champion.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
And related to, we got the survey up right now. We want to take a couple minutes, but nowadays, Bruce, do you think the feeling is that, or it's moving towards that basically, regardless of that any data collected these days, that there should be some sort of geospatial component attached to it, because pretty much in almost every case, somehow data is somehow linked geospatially somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think I could talk to this audience without saying that. Yeah.
Kudos to you, Bruce.
Yeah. That was a setup. Getting back to what Sherry talked about, the implementation example, that's a great thing. I mean, we gotta have examples so people understand how it's done and the best way to do it, and what it provides. And my good friend Joe Jones from Nassau County, long time ago when I was first dealing with GIS professionals in New York State, gave me some advice. He took me aside and he said, look, when you're in that room with all those people around that table, you got to look at each one of those and say, what's in it for me from their perspective? And then you'll know how to deal with them all. And the same thing goes for the CIO. I mean, they want to do a good job and they want to have winners. And if you can give them concrete examples, as Sherry's talking about out there, they got enough problems. They want to deal with winners, and that'll help certainly.
Yeah, some excellent points there. Now for the summary here for that survey, we had in the course of daily business, do you mind analyze information you collect for locational factors? 33% said yes, we have business practices that are designed to intentionally collect spatial data when other data is being collected. 24% said yes, but only for certain business areas. Examples, health department inspections, delivery truck locations. So those are the top two answers there. And that. And one other thing I think with the GIS, with the workflows and stuff there too, is Google is a company where when you see your Google ads, sometimes you're on sites and all of a sudden a Google ad will pop up and you're wondering, well, how in the heck do they know that I want that product and it's in this area type thing? But they're mining all that information and it's actually finding out your location, knowing where your location is. And when people are doing Google ads, they know what products are right around in your area and what ones that you're interested in, and then they start advertising that way by marketing those products to you that way. So that's an example of how GIS is being used in business workflows, I think, from a Google standpoint.
Yep. And that touches on some other stuff too for later on. Okay, let's talk about crowdsourcing. A long time ago, and still in some of the emergency management community, oh no, we can't use crowdsourcing or social media or this or that. And the next thing, you can't rely on it. Well, it's really gotten, with the advent of all the mobile technology out there, with the navigation systems, with everything, they've got feeds that are coming in rapidly for data, and they're learning to analyze it a whole lot better. The legitimacy, the statistical capability of this data, and the timeliness of it is making it very well accepted. I mean, I think that's changed even really in the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's been a huge growth thing. It's going to have a longer term impact on the GIS professionals. You're going to just get a whole bunch more current, more accurate data. You're going to be able to analyze stuff in more real time, provide more real time solutions. And I think it's going to drive the technology to be seen as a real problem solving tool as in the out years. It's not a 214 thing, but that's the way I see it. Okay, so Alan is outlining saying I'm only getting half the crowdsourcing slide. Anybody else have that same problem?
So, Bruce, related to the crowdsourcing here, is basically public generated data basically better than having no data at all?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So is by having like a crowdsource or publicly generated data coming in better than having no data at all in some cases?
Oh, absolutely. And I think as I'm starting to intimate the statistical accuracy of this stuff and how we use it is being, we're understanding better all the time. And it's being used, generated. Google understands stuff great, so does Facebook and other places. And you can go branch from this over into social media, just what people did in Atlanta the last couple of days on stuff. I think it's it is a way to go, and it's legitimate.
And the other thing is, like, each person basically is generating data of some sort each day, but in most cases that isn't being captured. But the other thing is, by crowdsourcing and having people providing that data, could there potentially be some privacy concerns also related to that, depending on what they're recording?
Sure. No question. There's no way to get around that one. Privacy is a big deal, and it's important. But you're being tracked constantly, and we don't even know what the NSA is doing.
What are your thoughts about a wiki database?
I think a lot of this just goes on without us even being aware of it. I mean, those of us that have GPS units in our car are they're mining all of that traffic flow data and coming up with indications of traffic speeds in certain roads, and we don't even know we're doing that.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the point I was making.
And here's the summary results of the poll here.
Okay.
I'm just going to jump over here. What are your concerns over collecting crowdsourced data? Actually, a high majority, 48%, said accuracy and reliability of the data. Do you see crowdsourced data becoming an important part of the big data movement? 42% said yes, this type of data will definitely play an increasingly large role in everything from emergency management to marketing analysis to consumer behavior studies. So those are the...
Yeah, excellent. And I get back to the point about the statistical reliability of the data is, people are worried about the accuracy, but the statistical reliability will prove it out pretty well. And as long as that's done better and better, I think that's what's going to improve the use of this. Okay, let's move on. Now we're on to big data. Last week, IBM announced they are investing $100 million into developing into a division that is developing its capabilities to provide analysis for companies for their big data. Companies understand, certainly Google, certainly Facebook, and companies like that, understand the value of the data, and in those cases, they can use it, but so many other ones haven't figured it out yet. This is something that's going to really, people are going to push hard. It's a differentiator, once again, to give them a competitive advantage. As those margins of profit get smaller and smaller, they're going to look for all the advantages they can, and this is big time. I think the problem right now is they can't effectively use it. Some can, but most can't. So for GIS, we think of it as big data being difficult to work with. They've got all this stuff. They're just grasping at straws how to use it, how to visualize. And GIS really has that potential to turn it on its head. I'm not sure if it'll exact right away. I doubt that. But once they figure out how to use it and integrate it into their analytical capabilities, I think it's going to be a huge driver for this.
And that's basically one thing too, is big data or any type of data, it's always going to be, I think that's like one of the things that are the most stable in GIS is the fact that no matter what, your data is always going to kind of be there, even as technologies continuously change, and how those technologies access the data may change, but the data is usually always there, and that's like one consistent that you can always count on. We do have a poll open up right now related to the growth and the use of big data here.
Bruce, I kind of agree with your comment about GIS having the power of visualization and that the application of that in big data. I think some of the issues, though, goes back to some of the other topics we touched on, such as CIO is not really knowing what GIS is all about. And obviously, if we're going to bring the benefits of GIS into the big data equation, the CIOs have to know that we have this capability.
Yeah, I have confidence that enough money is going to be thrown at it over the next couple of years that somebody's going to figure it out. Yeah. They'll probably get a whole lot of money for it, but that's okay. If they do, it'll really expand the market. And maybe it'll be a hybrid. I don't know. But I'm sorry.
Oh, Bruce, and for the summary for the poll here, for the question, do you anticipate that geospatial data will be a part of the big data movement? 48% said yes, it already is, and that was the majority there.
Excellent.
Alan submitted a comment on this one, sort of reaffirming the poll, what he just said. The ability of GIS to integrate access across mass sets and data silos makes it ideal for big data. Government's already doing this.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Okay, we're moving on. We're getting down towards the last 10 minutes or so here. And it's fun stuff. It's the stuff I really enjoy. The trend is for the growth in indoor mapping, near field communications. So I'm going to go back to that whole thing I was talking about. If you go look across our country, you've got all these companies, major companies that have put hundreds of millions of dollars into their brick and mortar stores. They are getting, they're losing market share rapidly to online sales, and they need to find a way to combat that, or they need to sell all their brick and mortar stores. Not likely to happen. But the one thing they can provide that online services can is they can allow the customer to go there, to reach out, to touch, and talk to a human being about the product or service or whatever. And that's the one thing they have. The one thing they don't have is it's a pain in the ass sometimes to figure out which store to go to and how to get there, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to have to make that experience much more simple, much more pleasant, and efficient. As I get in the store, I can go to the area, see and touch the product. They're going to be encouraging, and they already are, you're seeing it, but it's going to happen more and more, use their apps to easily find the products. And while they're there, as you were talking about a minute ago, Mickey, it's, you got this, but maybe you also want to look at this other kind of product that goes along with it or similar to that as well. And I think that's going to be a huge push because that's a differentiator for those commercial enterprises that have brick and mortar stores. And the other thing is you're seeing, like with Apple coming out with their iBeacon technology, MLB, Major League Baseball, they're announcing they're going to use that in sporting venues, and basically they're going to alert their patrons to where concession stands and other things are as they move through the area. Do I see it having a huge impact on GIS in the coming year? No, I don't. But I think it's something that we have to be aware of, and we have to understand that that's where it's going to go. And maybe in the out years there'll be something, and I can't quite figure it all out yet. But one of you will figure it out, and you can tell us what's going to happen.
Bruce, it's interesting. Mike Goodchild, who was the professor at the Santa Barbara University of California, he wrote an article on this recently in which he noted that this will be a big issue in the GIS community because studies have shown that people spend only 13% of their time outdoors, yet most of our technology is geared to collect information outdoors. So there's this huge gap between where people spend most of the day and where they can collect data.
Yeah, I didn't see that article. I saw something similar, that's very enlightening to think about that. Yeah, we were indoors most of the time.
And Bruce, do you see this impacting like emergency response too? So like if a fireman was entering, say, a building that had that capability in there, that they could potentially see where they are inside the building. So basically having like a digital blue or footprint of that building right there in their hands.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes a whole lot of sense. I hadn't thought about it before, but you're absolutely right. I think that's very good.
And Bruce, the summary here, or for the survey here, is that question 1, in your opinion, will indoor mapping have any impact on the GIS profession in the near future? Basically, there's a tie, but they're both yes answers. Yes, will become more viable in 2014 as the technologies are already emerging, and yes, but it will take several more years. So it looks like everybody's kind of in agreement that it will happen here. Do you anticipate that NFC technologies and GIS will become integrated in the near term? We had 18% saying yes, this is already happening, and 18% saying will happen, but not near term, and those are the 2 top answers there.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, let's move on. Alan points out that yeah, it's also very useful in infrastructure management. Now we get to the really fun thing, and I have been. You guys have to understand that I have been buying cheap watches for the last year and a half, not wanting to invest too much because I want to get an iWatch. I just want to get one. You know, it's just a toys for boys, I think you can call it. But I keep buying these cheap watches and the straps keep breaking. Never mind. That's a whole other topic. But there's going to be an onslaught with this. I mean, we saw at the end of 2013 the number of smartwatches, fitness monitors, other things that went out. Google Glass began to be commercialized in 2013. They just signed this week or the end of last week with a major health insurance provider to make that as part of have that covered under their policy, and they're going to come out with a lower cost, more commercialized product, and there will be, whether it's your iWatch that's coming out or Google Glass or a fitness monitor or this, there's going to be a huge push in this area, and you know, the technology, you know, I mean, we all carry cell phones and smartphones around all the time. It's going to be even more integrated into our everyday life. So what do we see for GIS? I really think, especially in the realm, if you think of Google Glass, there's going to be, you know, small impact this year, but there's going to be huge demand for more augmented reality systems, and whether we can get that, or excuse me, augmented reality, it should be data. Whether we can get that data somehow through crowdsourcing or however, but that's going to really drive the need to get that and put that in play. And I think the technology employed to put this out there is going to, you know, it's going to be a winner for GIS, and you know, it's going to make huge difference in the amount of data that GIS professionals can have long term. I mean, it'll be there, and it'll just, because the people are going to demand it, and or they're going to create it as they go.
I think there's no doubt that this is a big, you know, emerging trend. Heather notes that it was really big at the Consumer Electronics Show this year. You know, my personal opinion is
she got to go. She got to go there. I'm so jealous. Never mind.
Yeah, I think you know, time will tell on this one yet. We're not there yet.
And Bruce, yeah, the other thing I wonder too is with the wearable technology and stuff, you know, is anybody looking at the health implications to people potentially? Because one of the big things with cell phones has been the SAR rating, which is a specific absorption rate that your body takes in from the radiation from phones and stuff. Right. And, you know, with things like Google Glass and stuff like that, you know, what's the radiation output of something like that, and being that it's near your eyes, that is a soft tissue, I'm wondering if anybody's doing any research into things like that also as these wearable technologies start advancing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any of that. So, yeah, I suppose that's the real downside.
Because I know one thing, when I look for a cell phone, I actually look at the SAR rating and see which one has the lowest, and that's how I choose my phone related to that. So, and actually and usually what it tends to be is the Samsung phones tend to be the lower radiation phones out there for that SAR rating. You know, whether there's any relevance to it or not, it's one of those things that it's just wondering, you know, in 10 years from now, people might be saying, oh, geez, you know, because you were doing this back then with wearing that or having that phone, that's why you're having these health issues.
Wow. You just threw a bummer on my whole thing with the iWatch. Damn.
Yeah. Well, just look for the SAR rating on it, and you'll be all set.
Thank you.
As far as the survey,
about 1 minute to go here, guys, and we got an important issue to cover. So why don't you move on?
Yeah. All right. Well, just quick then. The summary results is that how much of an impact are you expecting that wearable technology and augmented reality will have on the GIS market? 30% said these will increase the demand for geospatial services and applications. So that was the top answer.
All right.
Okay, last one. Okay, drones. I know Vern's going to be all excited. We're going to talk about drones, Vern. But I honestly don't see, this is the Bruce personal opinion, and I read a bunch of stuff on them. I don't see him, pardon the pun, taking off in 2014. I think that the two major concerns there have to be resolved. The safety issue. I mean, we saw somebody start up a drone during the Colorado floods, and they got shut down because I think it was the sheriff was worried about them crashing into a helicopter. That safety issue is now starting to be addressed by the FAA, but they're a slow group, and they don't accept things too quickly. I mean, they just started allowing us to listen to music off our cell phones while we're taking off, and how long people know that that's reasonably safe. And the other issue, which is totally different, but it's just as big, and in some cases may have more impact on the whole process, is citizen privacy. There are so many different ways that you can capture data and look at things, and it can even be somebody going to a Brookstone store and buying a little drone out of there, and with basically a helicopter with a camera on it, and flying it over somebody's walled compound to see what's going on. I think we have to come to grips with that, and I think that's going to hold back this technology significantly. I mean, I did see that where Trimber was just putting out new applications to allow the use of drones for agriculture, but I just don't see it taking off this year. So I don't see that it'll be huge impact in GIS, but I really think if you step back, just sit back and think about this. Once the technology gets the okay, it'll make a huge difference. If you're capturing small areas, maybe large areas, I don't know how the technology is going to change, but it should lower the costs, and it'll certainly make it much more. It'll be much more easy to get the data quickly, and it'll be much more usable, and it should be able to make a difference.
We got the survey open right now, and the other thing is, Bruce, this kind of thing I guess to think about in the future for somebody, but who's going to be the first one to manufacture a drone detector? So as these drones get smaller and smaller and tinier, and they can infiltrate your home, are you going to have a drone detector in your house now to tell you if there's a drone in your home?
I can just see we'll change the word from fly swatter to drone swatter. Digital
zapper. And
Okay.
so we're getting got the results kind of coming in here, Bruce, for that question. It says, please indicate what you feel are the most significant issues related to the use of drones for aerial mapping. The top one is safety for the public on the ground and flying, and the second one is privacy. So that shouldn't be a surprise. Those are two of the big concerns, and those are the concerns that are being looked at right now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've gone over our time. I think it's, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. It's been fun. And I'll turn it back to you, Mickey, and Dale, and thank you very much.
Yeah, Bruce, before we go here, I saw that Ben Houston did post a question there. He says, I'm curious if there is a distinction between what we call geospatial technology versus the ability to simply track a GPS coordinate.
I think it's all part of the bigger picture, and I think you should, if you're into geospatial technology, I think you should try to expand your field as much as you can.
All right. Well,
Bruce?
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Bruce. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody have a good day.
Thanks for listening.